Welcome back, everybody, to the Lost Beat 6 show. I'm really happy you're here with us. I do apologize for the short little break we took, rather unexplained, but we're back. We're going to be wrapping up the PLaNETS expose, deep dive exploration, making the scene, deep dive exploration, and celebration of planets. I got a chance to talk to and hang out and meet a lot of these people since our last show, and it's been a blast. These guys are really awesome people, and I hope to be working with them in close with more projects in the future. Anyway, quick business here. Beefing Around the World is out. It's available everywhere you can stream music. We will be, we'll take some time to get our physical product out. As far as vinyl stuff is concerned, we need to refill our coffers for a moment or two. As if you want to help out with that, you just buy the record on Bandcamp. We don't really need, we'll make do. So anyway, that's happening, and we are working on a King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard vinyl release of Paris 19. I don't think anybody's made that one yet, as far as I know. So that'd be kind of special for us to do that, and we'll be sending some to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard themselves, and try to get some to the local area, and possibly get some as an online store. So that's also in the works, as well as getting ready to press more records for Big Die. And I know the Denim Emperor is on the move, and so is Dr. Fun. So things are rolling here at Lost Beat 6, and we're really happy about that, and we're in a very creative zone here. We're going to move on to the show because I know that's what we're all here for. My guest today on the show is Mr. Adam Cotton, who is the co-founder of PLaNETS. He's the main musical director. He's the lead guitar player, and very, very important part of this whole. He's pivotal to this whole scene working, and it was a plan to get him as the penultimate episode to this show. So you do know that we're wrapping this segment up soon. So anyway, I got a chance to talk to Adam in Austin. Or at his home in Austin, rather, and got a chance. This is more of a chance for me to understand how the record was made and the creative process, and how, on like a musical side, how this was all put together. Because we've talked a lot about the social elements, the creative elements, the non-musical elements, the visuals, all those really cool things that made the band kind of stick out. But if you don't have good songs, what's the point here? So. This is going into the actual the musical process and things like that. Adam has a podcast of his own called Is This a Dream, which is about lucid dreaming, and he'll talk about that at the end of the show, and I'll have links for those in the show notes as well. If you want to check out more things Adam's working on and his projects, I'll have links in the show notes. All right, so let's get moving, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Figure it out.
But anyway, Adam, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm really, really excited you can make it and join us on this conversation we're having about the PLaNETS universe. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me, Steven. I just want to say I think it's pretty cool that someone would be interested enough in our weird band to do a whole podcast series about it, and so hats off to you for putting all this together.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been a very interesting experience for me, considering I think by the time, not to get too much into my own story here, but essentially by the time I graduated college, that was sort of I'm not gonna say peak PLaNETS, but essentially the Troubadour show and the Dark Woods residency, or the satellite residency and the big Dark City, that kind of chunk of months in the autumn of 2014 is something I was sort of aware of, but not really. It was sort of a thing, I was starting to meet people at that point, and I feel like I missed the boat here somewhere, and that's kind of me trying to jump back on the boat, like swimming after the pick your analogy there. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun considering it just the amount of gratitude and sort of warm sentiments among everybody in this group, especially after the last couple streaming sessions. I kind of got back into this whole thing, and how everybody was just like, that was so awesome and that's so cool, and it's just sort of very, very positive things. And I thought the positivity I felt was a really good motivation to kind of start asking questions. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
well, there's a lot of it's a very positive group of people. You know, it's there's just a lot of bright stars in there.
Now you're from Texas originally, right?
I am.
Okay.
Austin.
So, Austin. Very nice. And you're back in Austin currently?
I am. Yep.
Nice. If you don't mind, just a little brief history on how you got from Austin to Alhambra.
Okay, sure. Yeah, in a nutshell, I grew up in Austin, and I ended up going to music school in Santa Cruz at UC Santa Cruz. And I was a banana slug, fighting banana slug, as
my sister's a
we
banana
like
slug.
to say. Oh, no shit.
Mm-hmm.
Can I curse on this show?
You can. Yeah, it's all good.
Great. Yeah, and so I lived in the Bay Area for a time, and then I kind of traveled around the western states. I kind of did a walkabout for a couple years, and I was briefly down in LA at one point, New Mexico, and up in Montana a couple times. And that's, I think you've heard this story, versions of this story a couple times, but that was, well, I was in this little town called Whitefish where Nathaniel and Stilwell grew up, and I was working at my friend Brett's recording studio up there at the time. And there was an open mic in town, and so I had been frequenting that. I think it was Tuesday nights, I want to say, at, or was it? I think it was at the Great Northern Bar, at their outdoor stage, and that was a fun scene. And I didn't really hardly know anybody in that town except Brett, and you know, there was this animated crew of people that kept showing up to this open mic, and you know, they'd get up and play songs, and I'd get up and play songs, and we kind of overlapped a little bit, and there was this one night where, you know, they had a pretty big group of people together. It turned out they were there filming this Bigfoot movie, and which I later kind of helped them with some just a little bit of sound design and other stuff, sound effects and stuff on. But I was, at the time, that night I was covering Do You Realize on Quattro, which is kind of like a baritone ukulele. And all these people started singing along. And, you know, like, I don't know. I mean, the Flaming Lips were a relatively well-known band then, but, you know, in this little Montana town, I just didn't expect, you know, it caught me by surprise. And that turned out to be their crew, and we started talking and ended up playing music together and made a little album and did some shows up there and kind of put this band together. And that was the first incarnation of what became PLaNETS. We started with a longer band name. We were the New PLaNETS at first.
Okay.
And that was actually in honor of Pluto, which had just been demoted that month. So it was kind of, you know, I don't know if I'll go as far as to say it was a protest, but it was sort of in that department. And so that was the first incarnation. We made this album called Have a Robot, or EP, I guess. And that was, you know, Nathaniel, I heard he told that story about how that came about. But so they needed to go to LA after that to sort of do all the movie shopping around stuff, and I had just been in LA, and I was like, hey, what the hell, let's go down and do the band thing too. And so that was kind of how we all ended up in LA and eventually in Alhambra. So yeah, that's the in a nutshell version. There was the second incarnation of the band name was New Planets. We dropped the and
I'm waiting for the Spinal Tap, the originals. We were the originals, and then with the new originals and the
right. Yeah, we kind of did
planets.
it backwards.
Right.
So then we went in the final incarnation, we just simplified further, and then we unsimplified by
spacing,
the spacing
spelling.
and capitalization, which
Right.
man, talk about a nightmare on social media or any, like, trying to explain to anybody then and now how to find, based on spelling.
I've gotten really good at the capitalization part, but I don't have the time to just space everything out on in the metadata these days.
Yeah. But it once you get it, it's kind of memorable. I mean,
Right.
it would be, it would probably be just as hard to find a band just called PLaNETS, just
Right.
as such a common word. So, I thought that was Stilwell's idea. I thought it was a cool idea. It was just in practice, it had its quirks.
That, and you had that logo. That logo had a really kind of defined simplicity, but it's like, I know it, like, every time I think I remember roaming around 2014, the satellite on other people's residencies, and I would see that logo in the monitors on the screens in the bar, just upcoming events and stuff like that. I'd see that logo. I'm like, that's pretty interesting. I'd say you can't really. It's a pretty bold thing. So if you didn't know the name, you would know the symbol or the horror the different sort of horror posters that were in the bathroom and stuff.
Yeah, if there was an emoji that was just that logo, it would be way easier to just send that to people. You know?
You could Prince, formerly known as Prince, that.
Yeah, I think that would be the solution ultimately. But we're doing the best with what we can here.
So we've had several different sort of backstories on the Dark Woods as a show and as a kind of theatrical production, but I haven't really. I was kind of hoping you can help me out with the some of the more musical developments of the production in both like the writing and recording of that.
Sure.
So,
what would you like to know?
all right. Well, let's start with the writing process. I know, was it kind of a music lyrics combination thing, or was that sort of a Lennon McCartney sitting in a piano thing, or
No.
Okay, no.
No, our writing process was a little strange.
Okay.
The genesis of, some people might not know this, and I think this video is still floating around on our YouTube. I haven't looked for it in a long time, but it's probably out there. But there's this video called "I Was a Bad Boy," and it's this thing we used to tell people to. It's a live recording, and Stilwell edited together some video footage, and it's one of those things that it was predated the Dark Woods, and it was part of the genesis of the whole thing. And we used to tell people, if you want to have an interesting experience, stay up late, turn out all your lights, light one candle, and put this video on, and commit to making it through the whole thing. It was like 30 minutes, I think.
Sure.
It's not like super crazy or anything, but it's a pretty weird music, if you could call it music. And that came about because, the short version of that story is the Alhambra house that kind of became a social center of our band scene that we lived in together. Had sort of a twisty-turny history to it. And at a certain point, I kind of commandeered the house. We'll leave that story for another time.
Sure.
But there had been some interesting things that had happened in that house, and some, felt like some darkness, to an extent. And so in a way, and at the time, Stilwell was living with Natasha a block away at these apartments. And so we were all kind of right around there. And so we, one night, sort of intentionally did, I guess the easiest way to put it would be, it was kind of like, felt like a musical exorcism of the house.
Okay.
To sort of, later I would go on to burn about a pound of sage in that house to sort of clear it out.
Sure.
That's seemed to help in my perspective. But so that night we were doing it musically, and so it's a pretty weird, dark, out there recording. And there's clips of that actually ended up on the album. Like I think there's a intermediary track called Creatures, which is a straight out clip from I Was a Bad Boy recording night. And there's other little, we sampled it in a couple places, but there's actually the original video, I believe, is probably still up on our site somewhere way back. It probably would have been like 11, 12 or something when we put that up. But we did it in like 2009 or 10. And so anyways, I think that kind of set the stage, vibe-wise in a way. And then following that, there was a short film that Stilwell and his film company were working on, and I was helping out with sound and music, called Cliff Lake. And it's like this short, like sort of film about survival in the woods. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of Stilwell's baby. He wrote that and filmed it and directed it. And so he needed some music for it. And so we sort of messed around with, this was kind of between the New Planets and PLaNETS in this sort of interim time, and we were just kind of being creative. And so the first two songs we wrote for that were Scared Coyote and Some Fires.
Okay.
And so that we kind of had those two as a pair, and that sort of went with the I Was a Bad Boy stuff, and that was sort of the genesis of the Dark Woods, because those three things together are kind of where everything came from originally. And so then we decided to make the two songs into an EP, and that was a 5-song thing, which are the main 5 songs on the album, which are kind of spaced out by some like different prelude and postlude kind of stuff. And the one other thing that got thrown in there, which I think has been mentioned, was we all were at Coachella when Fever Ray played, and it was just, I get chills even just thinking about that performance. It was a game changer. It was mind blowing. It was just super creepy and dark, but the music was really cool and vibey and slow. And that's kind of like, I'd say like there's a song on the album and in that show called Miracle Tip. And that's sort of, I think that song sort of came out of that sort of world. And also a lot of, there was inspiration for another part of like the vibe and sort of production angle and sound palette and stuff that came from that. So, those are kind of the main Genesis elements that I remember off the top of my head.
Those are like some of the core kind of centerpieces for the show as well. And what I really enjoyed about the record was how, on top of the vibes and the kind of the horror vibes and the soundscapes and the samples and was sort of the sparseness and kind of the, clearly like Zach kind of talks about how before he kind of joined in, like notice like there's all these dancers, but there's not a bass player, and there's not really a drummer on the record either. It's mostly a drum machine, right?
There's no drummer on the record. Yeah, that's just it's a drum machine and percussion that I cobbled together, but there's no drum set anywhere.
Was that more like a limitations thing or a creative decision or kind of both?
Yeah, I'd say it was probably both. We were in between drummers at the time, and so we were just kind of using what we had at our disposal. Mm-hmm. And so I am not a drummer, so I did the best that I could, just like cobbling together what I could between percussion stuff we had laying around and some basic drum machine stuff and whatnot. So yeah,
not to get too technical into the elements here, but was it a Pro Tools, Ableton, Logic sort of situation? I'm not sure. I'm assuming it was a DAW of some sort.
Yeah, I was recording in Pro Tools. The drums came from a number of places. There was, I think I had a kind of basic Roland drum machine that I used a little bit, and some places I was just layering samples, and other places I was recording live percussion on top of those things. So it was just kind of cobbling stuff together in that particular department. But I was going to mention before, when we were talking about Cliff Lake, there's a part on the album where you hear, it's before the track, it's the intro to the track Zombie, which is just no, it's not just instrumental. It starts out as instrumental. Mm-hmm. But there's you hear a guy saying something about, if throwing a body into a creek, that thing that gets yelled, to keep the meat good.
That's right.
Which is kind of, if you see the film, it makes sense in context, but that's actually directly sampled from the Cliff Lake film. That's out of there.
Right.
So
that was all recorded in the house, correct?
Yeah, it was all recorded in that house, which was on a busy street with a train right across from us, and in a tiny room with parallel walls, and like basically all of the things
you're not supposed to have, yeah.
that so it was, you kind of just do the best you can, but it was like monitoring was nearly impossible.
Right.
And there was a lot of takes where it was like car, train, whatever the hell's going on with the neighbors next door or in the other part of the house, or, dogs, all that stuff.
It's great how the indie filmmaking world met with the indie music production, DIY house home recording setup. It's interesting. You could talk guitars if you want for a little bit.
Sure.
So I've been watching the shows recently, mostly so I can show some of my friends what I've been up to the last few months, and not that I've been doing, I'm just showing what the subject matter was, mm-hmm. And just the impressiveness of how that built up, and just the I think part of the impressiveness is how well documented it is. These extremely ambitious shows, and I've always been impressed with the both the intro, outro, your guitar work and your guitar stylings with the extreme feedback and the sort of aggressive Hendrix. It seems Hendrix-esque to me, but hopefully I'm on the right track with that, and not necessarily. If there's something I'm missing, let me know on the influences list. But I'm not sure if I have a question with that. I'm just saying I like your guitar tones.
Well, thank you.
Sorry about that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we're just trying to have fun with it.
Yeah.
I guess I could say for any project, it kind of takes on a life of its own, and you just try to do your best to figure out what that is and play to it, so that's kind of what I was doing.
Yeah. In all respects to the other members of the group, it was essentially a power trio at its core. Did you find more flexibility in putting the show on with that, or in just sort of able to kind of with just sort of points of either improv, or was there any improv involved with that?
Yeah, there was some improv, there was definitely, the shows that you've seen that are the more well documented ones. There is probably less improv in those outside of, maybe just like not knowing how long certain things are going to go.
Right.
But those were tighter shows just because they were the nature of those productions and spots that we were playing. There was other shows that were way more off the rails that we would do and experiment with more, especially like stuff like Casey's, or even, during the satellite residency, some and other gigs. So, when we did the Dark Woods so many times over the years that we certainly screwed around with that a lot. And so, yeah, so there was a little of that. As far as the question about the trio goes, I think you've heard about how we sort of approach the band part, and it wasn't really a conscious choice. They're just, through the years, the way it worked out was we just kind of had a revolving cast of bass players and drummers over the years. So it was just kind of rolling with the punches, really. Okay.
And being the kind of musical director of the rotating revolving door, was there a sort of a common language or a common way of kind of communicating different parts for people as far as cues, or just making sure everybody kind of had an idea of what was going on?
I mean, I guess like each person's kind of a little different. You just kind of figure out, honestly, a lot of it was pretty cobbled together, because a lot of times, we had this big band and it wasn't like we had, people were showing up voluntarily.
Right.
The band, anything that the band made was going, which wasn't a whole lot, was going directly into the budget for production. So, nobody was really making any money off of it. We were all of that just went directly into like keeping everything going. So because we weren't paying people, and people were showing up by choice, which was great. It was awesome to have people show up and want to play, and just have a good crew together. And a lot of it was just hanging out and being buddies kind of stuff. But on the musical side, we just kind of did the best we could. A lot of times we didn't have very much rehearsal. A lot of times we were trying to do something really ambitious in a short period of time. Like even in between, like I don't know how many Dark Wood shows we had, we would change it up every show. And a lot of times we'd only be able to practice stuff like once, twice, no times. You show up and just be like, all right, this is what we're doing, and hope for the best.
I mean, I think the musicians that you had on board were fairly proficient, so I think that would probably help with the kind of the quick thinking fast on your feet kind of mentality.
Yeah, everybody was very gracious and wanted to do the best they could, and yeah, we had a lot of great people involved. So I felt very grateful to have people that wanted to show up and play this strange music, and they also all happened to be good, fun people to be around. So so it was a good situation in that way.
Nice. Is there a show that you find like that you would that you find the most fond? That's a bad way of saying that. Is there a show that you hold most dear? I'm sorry, man. This is a botched two ways of saying that question, but do you have a favorite show?
Oh gosh, a favorite show. That's so hard. What I can tell you is I'll tell you a story, because there's some good stories that probably a lot of people haven't heard, and I don't think this one has been told. I haven't heard every single episode yet, but If it has, then you're going to hear my version. So,
I like it.
Back in New PLaNETS era, we were cutting our teeth at an after-hours club where our drummer at the time, Eric, lived in and ran a quote art gallery that was 5,000 square feet in the middle of downtown before downtown got cleaned up, LA. And I think there's like an Urban Outfitters or something there, but it was at 8th and Grand. And at the time, it was kind of like, it was still pretty touch and go around that area. None of that stuff had moved in yet. So he had this after hours place, and we kind of just became the house band there by default. And there's just so many crazy nights, like you get this call at like 12:30 or 1 a.m, like, hey, you guys want to do a set tonight? And the set times are like 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, like those are kind of, so it's like, are we playing second? Are we playing third? Like those are the times you're looking at. So, I mean, you can imagine there was a lot of interesting nights, and it was a pretty popular after hours. Like there'd be hundreds of people showing up this place, at the place when, the bars emptied out. And so, there was a lot of interesting nights there. But there was one, this just goes in more of a good story rather than, necessarily a favorite show, but there was a lot of good moments there, or interesting moments. And so there was one night where, it was when Nathaniel was helping out and doing robot stuff. And it was near the beginning of when he had shown back up in LA, because he went up north for a while. And so we were starting to reincorporate the robot. And so it was, but it was before we had added a lot of the theatrics and stuff. So it was just the three of us in the band, and Nathaniel were the band at that point. Nathaniel was doing robot stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, it was one of those nights where we got a call, and I don't remember, but our set time was probably one of those 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there. And those were in the days where Four Loko was still legal. And so, everybody's doing their own version of what they need to do to perform it at 3:30 in the morning. Totally. And so Nathaniel, for himself that night, decided to go grab a Four Loko at the 7-Eleven down the street. And so, everybody's just getting ready to perform and sort of doing their own routine and stuff. And everything was pretty pedestrian and normal beforehand. And, then you kind of go up to play, and, the way we were doing it at the time, I guess it was kind of similar to how it ended up at the Troubadour thing that you've seen in a way, but it was way more primitive version where, we'd have this robot entrance sometime towards the second half of our set, maybe towards the end of the show. But I think then it was a little earlier. And we'd do some kind of dramatic entrance music, like something ridiculous, like The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, or Return of the Jedi, or, something like that. And we'd do this we'd give them a big entrance. It was a big room, like 5,000 square feet big, something like that. That might have been the whole space, but it was a very large warehousey sort of space. And so that night, we fast forward to that part of the set. And, we're doing The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, or whatever it was. And the robot makes this big entrance, and people, nobody's ever expecting that, especially back then when really nobody knew who we were. And every time we played at that place, everybody's in whatever weird headspace they're in at that point. And then this robot shows up, and this weird band's playing, and they're just like, what the hell? This is crazy. So that night it was like a big entrance, right? And everybody's just like going nuts. Like we kind of nailed it. And, the band's sounding great. And the robot's like, he entered from the back of the room, and he's in the middle of the audience. So I remember looking up and just like everybody's cheering and he's like got his arms up in the air and jumping around and dancing with people and stuff. And I'm like, this is great. And we were playing this really intense song at the time. So I kind of had to, put my head down and just to keep up. So I remember looking up then, and then like 2 or 3 minutes later, I take a look back out there while we're playing, and there's no robot. And it's like, what happened? And still we were playing this proggy, 12-minute barn burner song that we used to be a big part of our set back then. And so there was still some song to go. And so I'm playing and kind of like, trying to keep up and sort of, but like looking in the audience, like, oh, what happened? Where's Nathaniel? Where's our robot? What happened? And at a certain point, I noticed, because it's a big room and it was full of people, and I noticed there's this area where there's a circle of people with nothing in the middle that I can see from the stage. And it's just like this dark circle of people in the crowd, and there's nothing there. And I'm like, what the hell? And at the end of the song, sure enough, when people, I think that was near the end of our set, and people start clearing out, and the robot is literally face down on the ground, like kind of like a body you would see in one of those,
the crime scene.
One of those crime scenes. Yeah. He's just on the ground. He's out.
Oh my God.
It was like a firecracker situation. And, I don't know, what the, Four Loko or, 4 in the morning or what did it. But all of us in the band were just, it was just one of those entertaining late night moments that was, it's a fun, there was a lot of things like that happened that were just like, you just didn't know. Those nights were so unpredictable, but I think he eventually recovered, and, I think I seem to remember that he might have smashed his robot face in. I think his face was fine, okay. But I think he had to do some
get another
fixing up on the robot situation after that night.
Get another CRT monitor on there.
Yeah, but it was kind of a rock star moment even then for the robot.
I can also say I'm pretty sure I haven't heard that one before. So
okay, good.
I can confirm. I'm pretty sure, unless I forgot my own conversations, and I can roll the tape back. But that's an original for me. That's
good. And what I thought was also kind of entertaining was the people around him just. They were just like, it was like great when he came out, and they were just like, oh, whatever, and they just kept going, and like nobody really paid any mind to this like robot that's just like face down on the ground, and it was
just walked away.
It was pretty funny.
That seemed that has a.
It was fine.
It's almost like a sitcom moment. You know what I mean? Like
it was kind of like a band sitcom moment.
Yeah.
The three of us afterwards were just like, what the fuck happened to him?
That's great. Okay, so one of the few things I've noticed recently that I know, I'm not sure who runs the Bandcamp, but I noticed there was a release music. I actually just bought it earlier today, of the live satellite show of the last 20 minutes of that residency or something like that. Mm-hmm. Where the front of house guy was recording it on a 6-inch tape and had a lot of different songs from that specific era that hadn't made it into like a studio style recording yet. Song like the Sons of to Explode. I'm botching the name, but like
Sons of the Same Explosion.
Yeah. Which is a seriously damn good finale piece, by the way. It's a great.
Thanks, man.
It's a great it's a great one to go home to if you want to go home, or you don't want to go home.
It's fun to play too.
Yeah. Was there? And that's kind of leading into my discussions and the kind of the musical direction you wanted to take Dark City, which was I've been told it was more of a punk direction, perhaps. than necessarily the Dark Woods stuff, which was was well developed at that point in performance and writing wise. It was already kind of was already kind of settled. But I think Dark City rather had a more of a different energy to that. Was there anything that went into that creatively speaking that you can enlighten us with?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an accurate description. Dark City was kind of more gritty punk rock, more city,
Sure.
Yeah, that was kind of the type of stuff we were working on at that time. And I think it just happened. We had a friend actually that was there that recorded that on a tape recording setup that night. And something happened where he only captured the second half, but it sounded great and he caught us on a good night. So I think that's why we ended up releasing that, and there's a video that goes with that too on the YouTube.
One of my favorite moments in a lot of these shows is when Stilly comes up and says, "Thanks for being here. So and so's up next," and I always felt really bad for that person coming to follow you guys because they're the paper is still coming off from the lights and the disco ball, and it's I always kind of wonder how that always worked out with bands following you guys, because it's such a big, not only that, part of it's still like a 45, 50, 60 minute set. It's still a very compact show.
Yeah.
So it's always impressive how much stuff you got done, and it felt like a very long flowing thing as far as the droning intros, the song Father Time, Man Who Sold His Face. I'm sorry, I forgot the Nathaniel's character. I keep botching these names. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But anyway, those.
I like the Man Who Sold His Face. That could be that could be your guy.
Yeah. Who's he? What's his face? But those kind of central character master of ceremonies, if you will, and then the rest of the show continues on with the big climactic finales and dancers and going, and then then it's the next act, and it's like, I wonder what me as someone who's watching the footage exclusively doesn't get to see what that next act was. I'm sure they were really good and they were really having a good time and they were happy to be on the bill and all that stuff, but I always wonder kind of what that experience was between, like I said, I'm not sure if a question about that, but it's such a interesting sort of experience. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I hope that went well for people. We really did our best to, because a lot of those shows we were putting together ourselves. So a lot of times, like I was booking a lot of those bands and working out details, and we would all kind of try and make it as good for everybody as possible. There was exceptions in some places with other people booking and whatever, but like everybody in that band really sort of bent over backwards to try and make sure everybody else around had a good experience. So, for instance, like, although we might not be able to clean up the paper in the audience until the end of the night, we'd have, like Natasha and Nick and Alan and Melanie and Kylie and everybody else who was around that wanted to pitch in would just, like, while we were getting our gear off the stage, they were up there like picking up paper and sweeping stuff up. So, at least it wasn't, just a complete craziness for the next band that came up. Like we try and at least clean up the stage and try and, just do everything we could to make that transition as good as possible. And hopefully, like, we bring some people there so they have some new people to listen to their music. You kind of try and do a community sort of approach to it. And I think that generally went pretty well. But, you're just kind of, to speak to your thing about the 45 or 60 minute set thing. I mean, being in a band, like, you do so many of those that with a band like that, it really is partially a theater production. So those shows did get pretty tight towards the end. Like we really put a lot of thought into managing the time, you know, in those set lists. They'd change up until the last minute, and, you know, we kind of knew about roughly how many minutes like everything was going to be to a certain extent. And even, but, you know, but then the performance happens and, you know, all bets are kind of off, but not really, because we kind of have an idea of how things are going to be, but there's space in there for certain things to breathe, you know? So we're like, these 4 things are probably going to be about this long, and then this thing, I don't know, it could be this long or this long. So, you know, you just kind of figure it out. And I think that was one of the fun things about those shows we were doing, was there was a lot of different elements. You know, we'd have, you know, Nathaniel doing his characters and his song breaks, and Father Time doing his weird stand-up routine and sort of emceeing stuff. And we'd have our intros and outros, and, you know, the outro was usually where some bets were kind of off, so we'd sort of try and make space for that earlier. And, you know, you just kind of put it together. But it was kind of, you know, like you try and keep it tight at that point, because, you know, especially if you're hosting the night and there's other bands after you, like, you know, you don't want to be that band that makes the next band go on like 40 minutes too late or something. So,
yeah, right.
You know, you try and do the best you can.
Yeah, and especially if you were, I think I would trust you guys if you guys were booking the entire set, that you would have a good closer to follow for sure. So I'm to that point. I know you're on borrowed time, and so I want to dedicate maybe, you know, want to close it out with just kind of talking about your podcast. Is it a dream?
Is this a dream?
Is this a dream? Thank you.
Yeah, it's close enough.
All right, I'll take it. So, and I think I got your trailer, and I realized I think there's been a season worth of shows last year, so I'm going to be catching up on it. But are you currently if you don't mind, just explain to me and some to some of the listeners just kind of what your podcast is about.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, sure. The podcast is called "Is This a Dream?" It's about lucid dreaming. And lucid dreaming, for those who don't know, is when you are dreaming and become aware of the fact that you're dreaming. And then all kinds of things become possible. And it's a fascinating subject. I'm far from an expert on it, but it's always been an area of interest. And so I put together some podcast episodes. There's, I think, 7 out right now. And I got some great guests. They're mostly based around guests. The first episode is an intro episode. And so I do an intro episode where I kind of just lay the groundwork. And then I got like some of the best-selling authors out there about lucid dreaming and some other great folks. And we just talk about it. It's not really a how-to lucid dreaming podcast. It's more of I'd say it's more like deep dive, philosophical, and we throw some tips in there here and there, and some good references for people. But yeah, check it out. You can find, if that is of interest to anyone who's listening, there's a website, isthisadreampodcast.com, and there's portals there to. It's on all the main things, like it's on Spotify and Apple and YouTube, and
I'll put them in the show notes as well.
There's a Facebook and an Instagram. Instagram is probably the most active place where I put stuff up here and there, which is @isthisadream_.
Awesome. Well, Adam, it was really awesome to have you on the show. I really do appreciate you. This has been a real culmination of this whole project, and I want to make sure that I'm really glad we got a chance to get some insight from you on this whole adventure that you and all your friends and this community went on, and what it's become and everything. So I really thank you for so much for sharing your time with us.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Well, I appreciate you putting all this together, and thanks so much for having me on the show.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.